Most psychics make claims, but Greta Alexander, she made believers. She predicted events before they happened. She described crime scenes she had never seen and delivered messages from people long dead with a level of detail that investigators just simply couldn't ignore. For decades, police officers, grieving families, and even hardened skeptics all asked themselves the same question: how did she know? Tonight, we're stepping deep into the world of Greta Alexander, the psychics whose visions came true so often they started to terrify the very people that relied on them. So, if you think you've heard every psychic story, maybe you haven't heard this one. Greta Alexander did not start life believing she had psychic abilities. She was a wife, a mother, and by many accounts, a warm tempered, grounded person. Her life changed dramatically after one violent, life altering event. According to her own testimony and those who knew her, Greta survived a near fatal lightning strike. She said that after waking in the hospital, something in her perception had changed. Sounds were louder, lights were brighter, and there were impressions, moments, and flashes of things she could not possibly know. At first, she spoke of dreams that came true. Then she began sensing emotions from people she met. And soon she said she could see vivid mental pictures whenever she held a personal object belonging to someone else. Friends and family insisted she was never the same afterward. Some were frightened by the intensity of her visions. Others found them comforting. And a few said they were simply undeniable. Grace eventually embraced the ability she believed she had been given. She began practicing what she called intuitive perception, offering help to missing person cases when families felt they had nowhere else to turn. Word spread quickly across Illinois and beyond. Families seeking help found Greta kind, gentle, and unfailingly patient. She refused payment for most of her work, insisting that helping was part of her purpose. Soon, detectives, quietly at first, would reach out to her for impressions on difficult cases. Many agencies publicly denied using psychics, but off the record, some listened. Grace never promised miracles. She never claimed she could solve a case. Instead, she said she received impressions, images, sounds, emotions that might guide investigators to places they had overlooked. And in one case, in the fall of 1983, her impressions led somewhere horrifyingly precise. In April of that year, Mary L. Cousette, age 28, from Alton, Illinois, disappeared. A young woman with deep roots in her community, Mary's sudden absence devastated her family. Her boyfriend was arrested and suspicion fell on him, but prosecutors faced a fatal obstacle. There was no body. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months, and by autumn, investigators were running out of leads. 7 months later, tired investigators, desperate family members, and a silent ache for closure turned to Greta Alexander. When she held a piece of Mary's clothing, she reported being overwhelmed by a rush of emotion, fear, confusion, and an image of being pulled into darkness. She said she saw a bridge, a river embankment, a salt or rock pile, and a patch of land south of Peoria with a broken tree. She said she saw Mary's head was decapitated and that a foot was missing. She described a place she had never visited, a quiet rural clearing with old farm debris and the faint smell of gasoline. She mentioned a large rusted metal object, something like a discarded tank or farm drum, lying off kilter near tall weeds. She went so far as to predict that the officer who found the body would have, in her words, a bad hand. She submitted 22 clues in all. One investigator, after hearing Mary's family repeat the psychic's description, recognized the general layout of a remote location near the Spoon River. Whether from curiosity or a lingering sense of duty, searchers went to the area. And there, exactly where Grace's impressions had pointed, they discovered Mary's remains. The skull stood apart from the body. The left foot was missing. The officer who recovered her remains had a hand injury consistent with her prediction. The police publicly credited the psychic lead. The announcement shocked the community. Newspapers reported that a psychic's information had led authorities to the site. For Mary's family, it was a moment of painful closure, but closure nonetheless. Those who worked with Grace during this time recall an emotional, deeply empathetic woman who felt the burden of every case she touched. One former acquaintance said,
"Grace carried the grief of the families. It was like she felt what they felt. When she spoke about Mary, she cried as if she'd known her for years."
Another friend explained,
"She didn't act like someone showing off psychic powers. She acted like someone who desperately wanted to help."
People closest to Grace said she was often drained after sessions. She would sit quietly for hours, processing the images she'd seen. She worried she might misunderstand something, or that investigators would misinterpret what she shared. But those who believed in her work insisted that Grace's impressions were too specific and too unusual to be coincidence. When reporters later asked Grace how she received her visions, she struggled to explain.
But after that, things began happening. I would sense and I would know and I would feel. I would see pictures, I would hear. I would know when my parents were coming over before they would even call. I would just know it. I would know when the phone was going to ring. It was very, very upsetting. I didn't know what was happening.
She never claimed to speak to spirits. She said she felt them. And she often stressed that her gift was not something she enjoyed. She said it was overwhelming, exhausting, and at times frightening. One quote from Grace has been repeated for decades. "I don't see death. I see the need for someone to be found." The successful recovery of Mary Cosette's remains gave her family the chance to bury her properly, something every family longs for after tragedy. Law enforcement agencies in the region never formally endorsed psychic involvement. They never officially declared that Grace solved the case. But in private, many acknowledged that her information helped lead them to the right place at the right time. And for Mary's family, that was enough. Critics and investigators note that many alleged successes by psychic detectives come from retrofitting, reinterpreting vague impressions after the fact to match what was found. According to skeptical reviews, statements like water, wooded area, or embankment fit a wide range of possible locations, making hits less impressive under scrutiny. Nevertheless, in the years that followed, Grace's reputation as a psychic helper grew. She continued assisting families, always quietly, always respectfully. Some cases led nowhere, while others brought resolution. People who met her described her as humble, even shy, despite national attention. She insisted she was nothing special, that she was simply using what she believed she had been given. Her legacy is complex, a blend of empathy, intuition, and the extraordinary. But for one grieving family in 1983, Grace Alexander provided something irreplaceable. She provided a path and a direction, and a truth that had been buried in silence. In the years that followed, Greta worked on many cases, some documented, some obscured by time, some praised, some dismissed. One involved a missing teenager. Greta described a bridge, the smell of gasoline, and a tangle of wild vines. She said the boy was near water but not in it. Weeks later, searchers found the body under the edge of a rural bridge. The car crashed in brush so thick it had been missed in earlier searches. Some officers credited Greta, while others insisted it was coincidence. Another case involved a runaway who was believed to be in danger. Greta told police to search a rented storage building. She said she saw boxes, cold cement, and a girl hiding. Officers did find boxes. They did find cement, but the girl wasn't there. The runaway was found alive days later in an entirely different part of the state. To Greta, impressions were fragments, not maps. To skeptics, it was more proof psychic work was unreliable. In a separate investigation involving a suspected homicide, Greta described a metal frame, a gravel road, and a man with dark hair wearing work boots. Police later found a vehicle on a gravel side road, but it had no connection to the missing person. Again, inconclusive. But there were also cases where officers quietly acknowledged success. In one missing person case in Kentucky, Greta said to look toward the old power lines. She described a fallen tree, a rusted barrel, and a slope leading down toward a creek. Searchers later found the missing man near an old utility corridor. All three objects Greta described were present. No charges resulted from her information, but the family received closure. Greta also assisted in a case involving a small child believed to have been taken by a relative. She didn't provide a location, only the impression that the child was safe, unhurt, and with someone who believes he is protecting him. The child was later found unharmed exactly as she said. Even skeptics admitted it was striking. And then there were the cases where Greta's impression offered comfort rather than evidence. Families who believed she gave them peace even when the police files remain unsolved. Greta never claimed perfection, and she never claimed to solve crimes. She said only one thing with certainty: I tell them what I see. I can't control what the pictures mean. But her growing list of cases, some accurate, some partially accurate, some completely unconfirmed, created a storm of debate. Police departments who quietly used her would never acknowledge it publicly. Skeptics accused her of lucky guesses. Supporters insisted her hits were too specific to dismiss. And journalists couldn't resist the controversy, publishing pieces that portrayed her as everything from a gifted seer to a well-meaning woman swept up in belief. But through it all, Greta remained herself, soft-spoken, private, and unwavering. She never charged money for police work. She never claimed psychic powers made her special. She said the lightning changed her, and after that, she simply tried to help. The murder case with the 22 clues remains her most famous moment, the case that cemented her place in American psychic lore. But her later cases, whether confirmed or disputed, revealed the truth about Greta Alexander's legacy. She lived in the strange space between intuition and investigation, between belief and doubt. To some, she was a beacon of hope. To others, a puzzle the rational mind couldn't solve. But one winter in Illinois, she picked up a notebook and wrote down 22 clues. And someone's daughter was found. Whether by vision, intuition, or coincidence, Greta Alexander left a mark on every life she touched. And her story, part mystery, part controversy, part comfort, still lingers in the history of American paranormal investigation. Greta Alexander didn't claim to have all the answers. She just shared what she saw, one clue at a time. Some led to real discoveries. Others we'll never know. But for families she helped, it made all the difference in the world. Greta's story reminds us that sometimes hope comes from unexpected places. And it makes you wonder how much of the world slips by us, unseen and unnoticed, until someone with deeper insight or intuition draws attention to it. If you enjoy deep dives into paranormal cases, subscribe here for more true stories of hauntings, the supernatural, and unexplained phenomena. And in the meantime, remember, stay spooky.